A calm, soft-spoken black reporter stands ready with her mic, waiting for a brief interview outside a luxury wedding. The sun beats down, glinting off the sequins of expensive dresses and the polished chrome of arriving limousines. The air smells of money and roses. The reporter, however, seems entirely out of place, a small island of professional stillness in a sea of opulent chaos. She's not dressed for a wedding. She's dressed for work, in a simple but smart blazer and slacks, her microphone held with a practiced ease. The bride appears, a vision in white, a storm of lace and arrogance. She sneers at the reporter, waving her off with a dismissive flick of her wrist. The gesture is small but packed with a lifetime of privilege. She turns to her audience of fawning guests, and in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, mocks the woman standing before her. "We are not doing interviews with the help," she announces, the words dripping with contempt. A wave of cruel laughter ripples through the gathered crowd, a sound that echoes the bride's own disdain. Security guards, large and impassive, begin to move forward, their presence a silent threat. The bride points a perfectly manicured finger. "Get her off the property," she orders, her voice sharp and final. What no one knows is that the reporter is not a reporter at all. She is Ava Coleman, the billionaire owner of the very media network whose logo is subtly stitched onto her microphone. She is here undercover, a silent observer in a world she owns, on the hunt for a truth that had been whispered in viral complaints and angry emails. She is investigating a sickness, a deep-seated prejudice that thrived in these exclusive circles, and she had come to see it for herself. Minutes later, the small, unassuming camera perched on a young woman's shoulder quietly flashes from red to green. The feed goes live not just to a local affiliate, but to a national audience of millions. The bride's world, so carefully constructed and curated, is about to explode. Her arrogance, once a private spectacle for her wealthy friends, is about to become the scandal of the year, broadcast in high definition for the entire world to see. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story is already hitting home, make sure to hit that like button, because this one's about to get very real. The afternoon sun was relentless, baking the manicured lawns of the Sterling Grand Hotel. It was the kind of day that felt expensive, where the very air seemed to shimmer with the wealth of the people breathing it. This was the wedding of Tiffany Langford and Ryan Langford, an event less about love and more about the merger of two powerful dynasties. Ryan was the heir to the Langford Hotel fortune, a sprawling empire of luxury resorts. Tiffany, whose family wealth came from old money and shrewd investments, was the perfect match. Their union was a story, and stories needed to be told, preferably on the front pages of society magazines. That's why the press had gathered, a small, controlled group of approved journalists kept at a polite distance. Ava Coleman stood slightly apart from them, holding a microphone with the logo of a small local news affiliate, a subsidiary of her vast media empire. She appeared to be just another field reporter trying to catch a soundbite for the evening news. Her expression was placid, her posture relaxed. She was a picture of professional patience. To the guests sweeping by in their couture gowns and tailored suits, she was invisible, part of the scenery, like the floral arrangements or the valet service. Inside a remote production van parked a quarter-mile down the road, Marcus Reed watched the scene unfold on a bank of monitors. He was Ava's chief of staff, the keeper of her secrets, and the executor of her plans. He saw everything Ava saw through a tiny high-definition camera hidden in a button on her blazer. He adjusted his headset, his face a mask of concentration. "Feed is stable," he murmured into his microphone, his voice a calm presence in Ava's ear. "Crowd is as expected, arrogant, loud, and blissfully unaware." Ava didn't respond, her focus absolute. She was observing, gathering data, letting the scene soak in. This was the final phase of her investigation. For weeks, she had been working undercover, taking on menial roles at exclusive events to witness firsthand the discrimination that a viral tip had exposed. She had been a waitress, a coat check girl, and now a reporter, The goal was always the same: to see how people with power behaved when they thought no one of consequence was watching. The moment arrived. Tiffany Langford, flanked by a gaggle of bridesmaids, emerged from the hotel's grand entrance. She was a spectacle of white silk and diamonds, her smile wide and practiced, meant for the society photographers. Her eyes scanned the crowd, dismissing the less important faces until they landed on Ava. Ava took a polite step forward, raising her microphone slightly. "Mrs. Langford," she began, her voice calm and respectful. "Ava Coleman from Channel 8 News. Congratulations on your special day. We're doing a community spotlight segment on local events. Would you mind sharing a quick comment?" Her request was simple, professional, and entirely routine. It was a softball question, designed to be answered with a fleeting smile and a generic platitude. Tiffany stopped. The smile on her face froze, then curdled into a smirk of pure disdain. She looked Ava up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that was designed to diminish. Her gaze lingered on the simple blazer, the sensible shoes, the earnest expression on Ava's face. In that single sweeping glance, Tiffany categorized and dismissed her. She saw not a professional journalist, but a servant, a nobody. She turned to her bridesmaids, her voice carrying across the hushed courtyard. "Can you believe this?" she asked, not as a question, but as an announcement. "They let just anyone show up these days." The bridesmaids tittered, their laughter like the tinkling of ice in expensive glasses. Tiffany turned back to Ava, her voice now laced with a cruel, performative authority. "We're not doing interviews with the help," she said. The words hung in the hot, still air, sharp and ugly. A wave of snickers rippled through the nearby guests. They recognized the tone. It was the sound of their world reinforcing its own boundaries. Behind Ava, a young camerawoman named Grace Turner flinched. Her hands, holding the heavy camera steady on her shoulder, trembled slightly. This wasn't right. Grace was new to the job, barely a year out of film school. She had dreamed of capturing moments of truth and beauty. This was just ugly. She saw the hurt flicker in the reporter's eyes, even though the woman's expression remained unchanged. Her job was to film, to be a silent observer, but her conscience screamed at her to lower the camera, to stop documenting this casual act of cruelty. Two hotel security guards, men built like brick walls, began to move toward Ava. They had heard Tiffany's command, and their purpose was simple: remove the problem. Tiffany wasn't finished. She reveled in the moment, in the feeling of power. She pointed a long, slender finger directly at Ava. "Get her off the property," she commanded, her voice ringing with the absolute certainty of someone who had never been told no. The guards reached Ava, their large bodies casting a shadow over her. One of them placed a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," he said, his voice a low rumble. Ava did not resist. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead her case. She simply held her ground for one final moment, her eyes locked on Tiffany's. A deep, unnerving stillness settled over her. She leaned in just enough for her voice to be picked up by her own hidden microphone and the larger one she held. "You might want to think carefully about that, ma'am," she whispered. The words were not a threat. They were a statement of fact, delivered with a chilling calm that should have set off alarm bells. But Tiffany was deaf to warnings. She scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. She laughed, turning her back on Ava and sweeping her bridesmaids toward the wedding chapel, the picture of triumphant arrogance. She was completely, utterly unaware that her entire world was about to unravel. She had no idea that the camera feed she dismissed as local news was streaming, live and uncut, to a control room that could, with the push of a button, broadcast her downfall to the entire nation. Grace Turner's heart was pounding against her ribs. Her hands felt clammy on the grips of her camera. She had kept filming, her professional instincts overriding her personal horror. But now, as the bride and her entourage disappeared into the chapel, Grace lowered the camera, her arm aching. She looked at the reporter, the woman who had just been publicly humiliated, expecting to see tears, anger, or at least a flicker of shame. Instead, she saw an expression of profound, almost unnerving, calm. Ava Coleman stood perfectly still, watching the chapel doors close behind Tiffany. The security guards still flanked her, but their certainty seemed to have wavered slightly. They had felt the strange power in Ava's whisper, the quiet authority that didn't match her simple clothes. I'm so sorry," Grace stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She felt a hot flush of shame, as if she were complicit in the cruelty. I should have done something." Ava turned to her, and for the first time a warm smile touched her lips. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and seemed to instantly dissolve the tension in the air. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Ava said, her voice soft but clear. "You recorded the truth." In Grace's headset, a frantic voice was buzzing. It was the regional feed director. "Grace, was your mic hot? Was the feed live?" Grace's blood ran cold. In the chaos of the moment, she hadn't checked. Standard procedure was to mute the feed between takes to avoid broadcasting stray comments. But in her shock at Tiffany's behavior, she had forgotten. She quickly checked her control panel. A small green light glowed steadily. Live. It had all gone out live. "Oh my God," she breathed, her eyes wide with panic. "The entire exchange. It went out on the regional feed." Her mind raced. The Langford family practically owned this city. They had connections everywhere. A complaint from them could get her fired, blacklisted. She had just broadcast the city's most powerful bride verbally abusing a reporter on her wedding day. Her career was over before it had even begun. She looked at Ava, expecting her to share in the panic. But Ava just nodded slowly, as if this was exactly what she had anticipated. In the production van, Marcus Reed was watching the viewer chat log explode. The regional CNN website was being flooded with comments. Outraged viewers were typing furiously, their words a digital torrent of disbelief and anger. "Did anyone else see that?" one comment read. "The bride just called a reporter the help," another followed instantly. "That was disgusting. Who is that woman?" The hashtag #LangfordWedding was starting to trend, but not for the reasons Tiffany's PR team had hoped. Marcus calmly bypassed the regional director and opened a secure private communication line directly to Ava's earpiece. "Ava, the feed went out live. Regional chat is on fire. What are your orders?" he asked, his voice the epitome of professional detachment. Ava's response was immediate and cool. "Proceed as planned, Marcus," she said, her voice so low that only he and Grace could hear it. Grace stared at her, utterly confused. Proceed with what plan? The plan to get fired? The plan to be sued into oblivion? Ava turned her attention back to Grace, whose face was pale with fear. "Don't apologize for seeing the truth," Ava said again, her voice gentle but firm. "The truth is a powerful thing. Never be ashamed of showing it." As the organ music began to swell from inside the chapel, signaling the start of the ceremony, Ava discreetly pulled out her personal phone. Her thumbs moved with practiced speed across the screen, typing out a single short text message to Marcus. It contained only 5 words. "Go live nationally in 15. Marcus saw the message, and a thin smile touched his lips. He began rerouting the feed from the regional server to the main national broadcast hub. 15 minutes. That was just enough time for Tiffany Langford to say, "I do," completely oblivious to the fact that she was about to become the most infamous bride in America. The ceremony would be her last moment of peace. Her humiliation of a quiet, unassuming reporter was no longer a private act of cruelty. It was about to become a national news story, and the woman she had dismissed as the help was the one about to tell it. Ava Coleman was not a field reporter. She was not a community spotlight journalist. She was the sole owner and CEO of CNN Global Media, a media conglomerate that spanned continents. Her net worth was measured in the billions, and her influence could shape political discourse and sway public opinion. The woman Tiffany Langford had tried to discard like a piece of trash was, in fact, one of the most powerful women in the world. But Ava's journey to the top had not been paved with privilege. It had been built brick by brick with relentless hard work and an unshakable belief in her own worth. She was a self-made woman in the truest sense of the term. Her story began not in a boardroom, but in the hallways of a state university, where she worked as a janitor to pay her way through journalism school. She spent her nights mopping floors and cleaning classrooms, her mind alight with the stories she wanted to tell. She knew then what she knew now. That truth was the great equalizer. She had experienced the sting of being underestimated her entire life. She had been the only black woman in countless classrooms and later in countless boardrooms. She had been talked over, ignored, and dismissed. She had been mistaken for the coffee girl more times than she could count, even after her name was on the letterhead. But she never allowed bitterness to take root. Instead, she turned every slight, every moment of condescension into fuel. She outworked, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered everyone who stood in her way. She bought her first local television station with money she had saved, and a small business loan she had fought tooth and nail to secure. She turned it into a powerhouse of investigative journalism, and then she bought, another and another. Within 2 decades, she had built a global empire, all while remaining intensely private, a powerful but unseen force behind the news. This undercover investigation was born from a pattern she had noticed, a disturbing trend of viral videos showing wealthy, powerful individuals engaging in acts of casual, dehumanizing cruelty. These incidents often involved racial discrimination, a poison that Ava knew all too well. A tip had come in about the elite social circles in this very city, detailing a culture of arrogance and prejudice that was hidden behind a veneer of philanthropy and good manners. The complaints were numerous, but no one was willing to go on the record, terrified of the social and professional repercussions. So Ava had decided to see it for herself. She wanted to understand the rot from the inside. For the past month, she had lived a double life. By day, she was the CEO, commanding her empire from a sleek skyscraper office. By night and on weekends, she was a ghost, a nobody, an observer in a world that refused to see her. The Langford wedding was her final test case. It was the perfect storm of new money, old prejudice, and public spectacle. She wanted to see how this world behaved when it believed it was protected by its own power, when the cameras were present but presumed to be harmless. Tiffany Langford had not disappointed. She had provided Ava with the raw, unfiltered truth, a perfect encapsulation of the very disease Ava had set out to expose. Her mission was simple: justice through truth. She believed that the most powerful weapon against prejudice was exposure. Darkness could not survive in the light, and she, Ava Coleman, owned the biggest light in the world. She was about to switch it on. Grace Turner couldn't sleep. The events of the afternoon played on a loop in her mind, a sickening carousel of smug laughter and quiet dignity. She was back home in her small apartment, the city lights twinkling outside her window. But all she could see was the sneer on Tiffany Langford's face. All she could hear was the cruel, dismissive tone. "We're not doing interviews with the help." The words echoed in her ears, a stark reminder of the casual ugliness she had witnessed. She had the footage saved on a secure drive. She sat at her small desk, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her troubled face. She played the clip again and again. Each time she felt a fresh wave of nausea. It wasn't just the bride's words, it was the laughter from the guests, the silent compliance of the security guards, the whole atmosphere of accepted cruelty. Her conscience was at war with her fear. A deep, primal instinct for self-preservation told her to delete the footage. Bury it. Pretend it never happened. The Langfords were powerful. They were connected. If this clip went public, they would come after the source. They would find her, the young camera woman who had forgotten to mute her feed. Her career, the dream she had worked so hard for, would be over. She would be labeled a troublemaker, a liability. No other network would touch her. But another voice, a quieter but more persistent one, urged her to do the right thing. It was the voice of the young girl who had gone to film school believing in the power of the camera to expose injustice. It was the voice that whispered, "The truth matters." She thought of the reporter, Ava Coleman. She remembered the woman's incredible poise, her refusal to be diminished. She remembered her warm smile and her reassuring words, "Don't apologize for seeing the truth." Ava hadn't been afraid. Why should she be? With trembling fingers, Grace opened her connection to the CNN internal network drive. It was a vast, secure server where raw footage was uploaded for review by senior producers. She found the folder for the Langford wedding and created a new file. She dragged the clip from her local drive and dropped it into the folder. As the progress bar filled, her heart hammered in her chest. This was it. There was no going back. After the upload was complete, she did one more thing. She flagged the file with a high-priority tag, ensuring it would be seen by senior editors immediately. Then, driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, she added a short, anonymous note. "This is an incident of public racial discrimination involving the Langford family. The public deserves to see this." She hit send and leaned back in her chair, her body shaking with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. She had made her choice. She had chosen truth over fear. Within minutes, something extraordinary happened. A producer in the national newsroom, intrigued by the flag and the note, reviewed the clip. He was horrified. He immediately shared it with a few trusted colleagues. From there, it spread like wildfire through the network's internal channels. Someone, breaking protocol, leaked a low-resolution version of the clip to a popular social media blogger. The blogger posted it, and the internet did the rest. The hashtag Grace had seen starting to trend earlier, #Langford wedding, was now exploding. But a new one was emerging alongside it, one that was far more potent. No interviews for people like you. It was raw, it was angry, and it was going viral at a breathtaking speed. Grace watched in stunned silence as her small act of conscience ignited a national firestorm. She had risked her career to do the right thing, and now it seemed the entire world was standing with her. Tiffany Langford woke up the next morning in a haze of champagne and self-satisfaction. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse suite, illuminating a scene of post-wedding bliss. Her ridiculously expensive wedding dress was draped over a chair, a monument to her perfect day. Ryan was still asleep beside her, a contented smile on his face. Tiffany stretched languidly, feeling a deep sense of triumph. Everything had gone according to plan. The ceremony was flawless, the reception was decadent, and most importantly, she had been the undisputed star of the show. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, eager to see the first wave of fawning media coverage. Her personal social media was already flooded with photos her friends had tagged her in. She scrolled through them, a giddy smile on her face. There she was, cutting the cake. There she was, sharing her first dance with Ryan. She looked radiant, powerful, adored. Her bridesmaids began to stir in the adjoining room, and soon they were all gathered in her suite, sipping mimosas and reliving the highlights of the previous day. "Did you see the look on that pathetic reporter's face?" Tiffany said, laughing as she recounted the incident outside the chapel. "She just froze. I will never forget it." Her friends joined in the laughter, their voices a chorus of sycophantic agreement. "You totally put her in her place, Tiff," one of them said. "It was iconic." Ryan emerged from the bedroom, wrapping his arms around his new wife. "That's my girl," he said, kissing her on the cheek. "Never afraid to take out the trash." They were in their own little bubble of privilege, completely insulated from the storm that was raging outside. Tiffany's phone began to buzz incessantly. It wasn't the usual trickle of notifications. It was a constant, frantic vibration. She frowned. annoyed by the interruption. She opened her phone, expecting to see more congratulatory messages. Instead, she was met with a wall of hate. Her mentions were a toxic sewer of insults and threats. Thousands upon thousands of angry comments from people she had never met. Racist bride. Entitled monster. Hope your marriage is as ugly as your personality. Tiffany's smile vanished. Her blood ran cold. What was this? A coordinated attack? A prank? She frantically searched her name online. The top results were not the glowing society articles she had been expecting. They were headlines from major news outlets. America's most arrogant bride. Viral video shows hotel heiress mocking black reporter. Had no interviews. For people. Like you trends as Tiffany Langford faces national backlash. Her hands started to shake. She clicked on one of the links and a video began to play. It was the clip. The whole ugly exchange was there for the world to see, captured in perfect damning clarity. She heard her own voice, sharp and cruel. She saw her own sneer, magnified and replayed. The laughter of her friends now sounded monstrous. Her world, which had seemed so perfect just moments before, was collapsing in real time. The buzzing of her phone was no longer just a notification. It was the sound of a million voices, all crying out in judgment. She was no longer Tiffany Langford, the beautiful bride. She was Tiffany Langford, the villain in a story that had captivated the entire country. While Tiffany's world imploded, Ava Coleman sat in her office on the 50th floor of the CNN Global Media headquarters. The space was a testament to her power and success. It was minimalist and elegant, with panoramic views of the New York City skyline. There was no disguise now. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. She looked every bit the billionaire CEO she was. On a massive screen that covered one entire wall, a dozen different news feeds were playing simultaneously. They all showed the same thing: the viral clip of her confrontation with Tiffany, followed by a torrent of commentary and analysis from news anchors and social media influencers. Ava watched the meltdown with a calm, dispassionate focus. This was not about revenge. It was about consequences. Marcus Reed stood beside her holding a tablet that displayed real-time analytics. The clip has over 50 million views across all platforms, he reported, his voice even. And it's only been 12 hours. No interviews for people like you is the #1 trend worldwide. Ava nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the screen. She saw Tiffany's smug face, then her own calm expression. She had created this moment not through anger, but through a carefully executed plan. Tiffany had walked right into the trap, armed with nothing but her own arrogance. With calm, quiet precision, Ava picked up the phone on her desk. It connected directly to the main boardroom, where the network's top executives were already assembled waiting for her instructions. "Pull the high-definition footage from the archives," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for debate. "I want the full, unedited clip of the exchange at the Langford wedding. Run the segment nationally during prime time tonight. Let the world see it raw. No commentary, no spin, just the truth." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then the head of programming replied, "Yes, Ms. Coleman. Consider it done." Ava hung up. Marcus turned to her, a look of admiration in his eyes. "Legal is already on it," he said. "They've confirmed we are fully within our rights. The event was on public access hotel grounds and our crew had the necessary permits. Tiffany Langford has no legal recourse." "Good," Ava said simply. Her plan was moving into its next phase. It wasn't enough for the world to see a grainy, viral clip. They needed to see it in crystal-clear high definition, broadcast on the most trusted news network in the world. They needed to see every nuance of Tiffany's disdain, every flicker of cruelty in her eyes. Then, Ava did one more thing. She instructed Marcus to send a private, encrypted message to Grace Turner. The message was short and transformative. Stand by for an exclusive interview. You'll be leading it. In her small apartment, Grace's phone pinged. She read the message, and her breath caught in her throat. Her? Leading a national interview? She was a junior camerawoman. But as she read the name of the sender, she understood. It was from Ava Coleman. The woman she thought was a humble reporter was someone much, much more powerful. And that woman had just entrusted her with the biggest story of her life. The fear that had plagued her all night was gone, replaced by a surge of purpose. She had made a decision to stand for the truth, and now she was being given the chance to tell it to the world. That evening, millions of Americans tuned in to CNN for the primetime news hour. They were expecting the usual rundown of political updates and world events. Instead, the screen went black. Then the footage began to play. It was the clip from the Langford wedding, but this was not the shaky, low-resolution version that had been circulating online. This was crisp, professional, high-definition footage. The audio was perfect. Every cruel word Tiffany Langford had spoken was captured with chilling clarity. Across the country, in living rooms and sports bars, people fell silent. Jaws dropped. They saw Tiffany's dismissive wave, her condescending smirk. They heard her say, "We're not doing interviews with the help." They heard the collective snicker from her wealthy friends. They saw the calm, dignified reporter who refused to be broken. The impact was immediate and seismic. The viral video had been shocking, but this was different. This was a statement from one of the world's largest news organizations. This was CNN declaring that this was not just a piece of internet gossip. This was a national news story about prejudice and power. The online outrage, which had been simmering all day, boiled over. People flooded social media, their anger renewed and amplified. The story was no longer just about a rude bride. It was about a fundamental issue of respect and decency. The fallout for the Langford family was swift and severe. The switchboard at the Langford Hotel chain headquarters was overwhelmed with angry calls. Corporate clients, spooked by the toxic publicity, began to pull their multi-million-dollar contracts. The brand, once associated with luxury and prestige, was now synonymous with arrogance and bigotry. Sponsors who had endorsed Tiffany as a social media influencer began to publicly sever their ties, issuing statements condemning her behavior. Employees at Langford hotels, particularly people of color, began to resign in protest, sharing their own stories of mistreatment on social media. The Langford empire was shaking to its foundations. In their penthouse suite, Tiffany and Ryan watched the broadcast in horrified silence. They had spent the day in frantic damage control, calling their powerful friends and trying to leverage their influence. But their power was useless against the tidal wave of public opinion. Tiffany's father called, his voice a mixture of fury and panic. He screamed that she had disgraced the family name, that she had jeopardized decades of hard work with one moment of stupid, careless cruelty. He informed her that he was hiring a crisis PR firm, but even he sounded doubtful that the damage could be contained. Meanwhile, in a quiet studio at CNN headquarters, Grace Turner was preparing for her first ever live national segment. Her hands were clammy, but her resolve was firm. She was no longer a frightened, inexperienced junior. She was a journalist with a story to tell. Ava Coleman was with her not as a boss, but as a mentor. She spoke to Grace in a calm, steady voice, walking her through the interview questions, giving her advice on how to stay focused under the bright lights. "Just tell the truth, Grace," Ava said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them what you felt. The truth is all the power you need." Grace looked at Ava, this incredible woman who had trusted her, and felt a surge of courage. She was ready. The story was hers to tell, and she would not let Ava, or the truth, down. The day after the national broadcast, a formal, elegantly worded email arrived in Tiffany Langford's inbox. It was from the executive office of CNN Global Media. It was an invitation. Ava Coleman's team was formally inviting Tiffany and her new husband, Ryan, to appear on a special live broadcast at CNN headquarters. The invitation stated that it was an opportunity to clarify their side of the story and address the public conversation directly. The crisis PR firm Tiffany's father had hired immediately advised against it. "It's a trap," the lead consultant said bluntly. "They're not looking to help you. They're looking for a public execution." But Tiffany's arrogance, though battered, was not broken. She saw the invitation not as a threat, but as an opportunity. She had always been able to talk her way out of trouble. She was charming, she was beautiful, and she came from a world where apologies were transactional and consequences were for other people. "No," she said, overriding the advice of the professionals. "This is perfect. We'll go on air. I'll be sincere. I'll cry a little if I have to. We'll say it was a huge misunderstanding. The stress of the wedding, a private joke taken out of context. People will forgive me. They always do." Ryan, ever the loyal and shallow husband, agreed. "You can handle this, Tiff," he reassured her, his own confidence buoyed by hers. "We'll go in there and we'll fix this. We'll control the narrative." So they agreed. The interview was set for the following afternoon. Tiffany spent the morning carefully crafting her image. She chose an elegant conservative dress in a soft, non-threatening shade of blue. She had her hair and makeup done by a professional team, with specific instructions to make her look vulnerable, remorseful. She stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing her lines. "It was a terrible miscommunication," she would say, her voice full of regret. "That's not who I am. I have the utmost respect for working professionals." Ryan watched her, nodding in approval. They were a team, the Langfords. They would weather this storm just as they had weathered every other minor inconvenience in their charmed lives. When they arrived at the massive CNN headquarters in New York, they were treated with a cool, detached professionalism that was more unnerving than open hostility. They were escorted through a maze of corridors to a large, state-of-the-art television studio. The air was cold, and the silence was broken only by the quiet hum of electronic equipment. They were led to a small, plush sofa in the center of the set, facing a series of cameras that looked like large, black insects. The studio lights were blindingly bright, and Tiffany felt a small flicker of anxiety. This was more intimidating than she had expected. A producer informed them that the broadcast would begin in 5 minutes. Tiffany took a deep breath, composing her face into an expression of somber contrition. Ryan gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. They were ready. They would fix this. Then the large monitor on the main studio wall, which had been displaying the CNN logo, flickered to life. An image appeared on the screen. It was a professional headshot of a woman, poised and powerful, dressed in a crisp white blazer. Beneath the image was a name and a title written in bold, authoritative text. Ava Coleman, CEO, CNN Global Media. Tiffany stared at the screen. Her mind struggled to process the information. The face. She knew that face. It was the face of the reporter, the quiet, unassuming woman she had dismissed, mocked, and ordered to be removed from her property. A cold, sickening wave of dread washed over her. Her confident smile began to fade. The carefully constructed facade of her remorse crumbled, replaced by a raw, naked panic. The woman she had called the Help was the CEO of the entire network. It wasn't a trap, it was an ambush. And she had just walked straight into the center of it. The studio floor director's voice cut through the thick, tense silence. "We are live in 5, 4, 3, 2. The red lights on the cameras blinked on. They were live. A graphic filled the screen for the home audience. "The Langford interview, a CNN special report." Then, the image cut to the studio, showing Tiffany and Ryan sitting on the sofa, their faces illuminated by the harsh studio lights. But the camera wasn't focused on them. It was focused on the woman who walked onto the set from the shadows. It was Ava Coleman. She was not dressed as a field reporter. She was wearing the same powerful white blazer from her corporate headshot, her presence commanding the entire room. She took a seat in a large armchair directly opposite Tiffany, her expression calm, her gaze level and direct. Tiffany's jaw dropped. A small, involuntary gasp escaped her lips. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and trembling under her expensive makeup. This couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare. The woman she had humiliated, the woman she thought was a nobody, was sitting across from her, holding all the cards. The studio audience, a live collection of journalists and industry insiders, let out a collective, audible gasp. The rumor had been spreading, but seeing it confirmed live on national television was another thing entirely. The powerful inversion of roles was stunning, a moment of real-life drama more compelling than any scripted television show. Ava Coleman looked directly at Tiffany, her eyes holding no malice, only a profound and unnerving stillness. She spoke, her voice broadcast to millions of people around the world. It was the same calm, clear voice Tiffany remembered from the wedding. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Langford," Ava began. "Thank you for joining us." She paused for a beat, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I believe we've met before, though under different circumstances." Tiffany's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her mind was a chaotic swirl of denial and terror. Ryan, sitting beside her, was equally stunned into silence, his face a mask of disbelief. Ava continued, her voice never rising, yet every word landed with the force of a hammer blow. "Do you still believe," she asked, her gaze unwavering, "that people like me shouldn't be interviewed?" The question hung in the air, a perfect, devastating echo of Tiffany's own cruel words. The world watched as Tiffany Langford, the arrogant bride, was forced to confront the full magnitude of her mistake. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The cameras captured every flicker of fear in her eyes, every tremor of her lip. And standing just off to the side, out of the main camera shot but visible to the studio audience, was Grace Turner. She was holding a microphone, her expression steady and professional. Ava had brought her here not just as a witness, but as a symbol. She was the young journalist who had chosen integrity over fear, and now she was standing beside the most powerful woman in media as justice was delivered, live, and on the air. The power dynamic had not just been inverted, it had been shattered. The woman who was deemed unworthy of a simple comment was now commanding the conversation, and the woman who believed she was the center of the universe was now just a disgraced guest on someone else's show. The aftermath of the live interview was not just fallout, it was a demolition. The clip of Ava's grand reveal, her calm, devastating question to a visibly shattered Tiffany, became an even bigger viral sensation than the original incident. It was played on every news channel, dissected on every talk show, and shared millions of times on social media. It was a masterclass in public reckoning. The consequences for the Langford family were immediate and brutal. The few remaining sponsors and corporate partners of Ryan's hotel chain pulled out within hours of the broadcast. The company's stock price plummeted. The board of directors, facing immense pressure from shareholders and the public, convened an emergency meeting. Less than 24 hours after the interview, they announced that Ryan Langford had been fired from his executive position. His own family's company had cast him out to save itself. Tiffany, in a last desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, recorded an apology video from her penthouse suite. She cried. She spoke of her deep regret and her commitment to learning and growing. But the public saw it for what it was, a hollow, self-serving performance. The video was mocked mercilessly, torn apart by commentators who pointed out that her tears were not for the woman she had insulted, but for the life of privilege she had lost. She was a pariah, isolated and disgraced. The world she had once commanded now wanted nothing to do with her. In stark contrast, Grace Turner became a national sensation. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of journalistic integrity and moral courage. She was interviewed by major publications, celebrated for standing up to discrimination when it would have been easier to stay silent. Job offers from rival networks poured in, but she politely declined them all. Her loyalty was to the woman who had trusted her. Ava Coleman's final statement from the broadcast became the quote of the year. After Tiffany's stammering, incoherent response, Ava had turned to the camera and spoken to the nation. "Respect is not optional," she had said, her voice filled with a quiet, powerful authority. "It is not a gift to be given to some and denied to others based on their job, their clothes, or the color of their skin. It is the foundation of our shared humanity. Without it, we are nothing." The words resonated deeply with the public, becoming a rallying cry for decency and respect. They were printed on T-shirts, shared in memes, and quoted by politicians. The moral order, which had been so casually upended by Tiffany's arrogance, had been restored, publicly and decisively. The world had watched as a bully was held accountable, and it had cheered. A few weeks later, the media storm had begun to subside. The world, as it always does, had moved on to the next story. But for the people at the center of the storm, life had changed forever. Grace Turner walked into Ava Coleman's office on the 50th floor, no longer a nervous junior, but a newly promoted senior field producer. The city's skyline stretched out before her, a view she had never imagined she would see. Ava was standing by the window, looking out over the city she had in many ways conquered. She turned and smiled as Grace entered. "You've earned this, Grace," Ava said, gesturing to the view. "All of it." Grace shook her head, still in awe of the woman before her. "I just did what was right," she said quietly. "That's not as common as you think," Ava replied. "Never forget what you learned. Truth has power, and so do you. Never let anyone make you feel small enough to forget that." Ava walked Grace to the door, a final piece of advice on her lips. "Your camera is not just a lens," she said. "It's a weapon against lies, and a shield for the voiceless. Use it wisely." As Grace left the office, her future bright and full of promise, Ava returned to the window. She looked down at the bustling streets below, at the millions of people living out their own stories. Her work was not done. There would always be other Tiffanys, other pockets of arrogance and prejudice that needed the disinfectant of sunlight. As the sun began to set, the massive electronic billboard in the center of Times Square lit up. It was a new ad for CNN. It featured a simple, powerful portrait of Ava Coleman, and beneath it the words that had captured the nation's attention. "Respect is not optional. It's the foundation of humanity." Ava looked at the billboard, a quiet, contemplative expression on her face. She had not set out to humiliate Tiffany Langford for personal revenge. Her goal was much larger. It was to send a message, to remind the world of a simple, fundamental truth. Arrogance is loud, but dignity is unstoppable. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand quietly in your truth and wait for the world to see it. Never judge someone by their uniform, their title, or the color of their skin. In a world that is so quick to categorize and dismiss, we often forget to look beyond the surface. We see a janitor, not the student they are working to become. We see a waitress, not the artist they are struggling to be. We see a field reporter in a simple blazer, and we fail to recognize the billionaire CEO standing right in front of us. We build our judgments on flimsy foundations of appearance and assumption, creating hierarchies that are both unfair and untrue. The person you mock, the person you dismiss as the help, might just be the architect of the very world you live in. They might own the building you work in, the network you watch, the company whose products you use. Power doesn't always announce itself with fancy clothes or loud proclamations. True power is often quiet, observant, and patient. It doesn't need to shout because it knows its own strength. It simply waits for the right moment to reveal itself. Respect costs nothing. It is a simple currency of kindness and decency that is available to everyone regardless of their wealth or status. It is a choice we make in every interaction, a decision to see the humanity in the person standing before us. But losing it, as Tiffany Langford discovered, can cost you everything. It can cost you your reputation, your career, your fortune, and your place in the world. Arrogance builds a kingdom on sand, but dignity is a fortress built on rock. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.